Yay, thank you. Awesome. I'm gonna share my screen. Um, my entire screen. Okay.
Oh, and sorry, I'll just say also, we have a pretty small group here tonight, so I think it's fine to interrupt with like absolutely pressing questions, but if we try to keep the questions to a minimum, we will have a Q&A session at the end. Is that okay with everybody? Cool. Right.
Amazing. All right. Can everybody see?
Yes.
Awesome. I cannot see myself, just so you know. So, if I don't know, if you see something, let me know. So tonight we're going to talk about morels and spring mycology. Bethany introduced me already, but just so you know, you can reach me or us via the Vermont Mycological Society, or as well my club on the Quebec side, les Mycologues de l'Estrie. I am originally from Quebec, French Canadian, and moved to the States because I love an American. And we got married, we have a little girl, and we spend our summers walking the woods, trying to see what we can find. We're going to start by talking about spring species that are not morels, just an overview of what you can find in the forest in the spring in this season. And then most of the talk is going to be about actual morels. We're going to learn how to identify them. We're going to learn how to find them, what type of environments they like, what we should keep an eye open for. And then we're going to discuss their edibility. And if we have time at the end, maybe a little bit about their cultivation. I am not an expert in cultivating mushrooms, but I do like to understand their life cycle and how we get to, we had to crack the code of morels to make that one happen. So it's interesting to see. So in the spring, which around here in Vermont happens to be mid to late April to early June, what happens to the ecosystems is that the snow will melt, so you have new substrate available for mushrooms to digest. So a new log or a new anything that was under the snow that was frozen, really. So there's going to be some spring species that are saprobes, decomposers. Some decomposers also like cooler temperatures. So some mushrooms that you would find in the fall, you're going to find in the spring as well. One of those that is important to recognize is the funeral bell, the Galerina marginata. It contains the same toxins as the white deadly amanitas. So we'll talk about it a little later again, but it's a species that likes to grow when it's cold outside. So it's going to come out both in the spring and in the fall. And then in the spring, we also have trees that don't have their leaves yet, which allows the sun to kind of warm up the soil in the forests. And there's better wind dispersal, so spore dispersal can happen more easily. So some species of plants, but as also mushrooms, have taken advantage of that, including morels. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Then we also have a summer season in mycology. There's kind of a break in June where not much grows because the main triggers of spring species are behind and the main triggers of summer species are not there yet. But in July and mid-August, you start having warmer temperatures, those electric thunderstorms that give a lot of water at once. Some species in Vermont, and that's mostly for Quebec, but in Vermont as well, you can see summer species that like the, sorry, that you would find more south than here, like in Connecticut or Pennsylvania. In the summer, you're going to see them up here as well when it gets warm enough. You can find chanterelles in the summer. That's when they start. They continue till September. And then in the fall is when the trees are preparing for winter. So they stop feeding their mushrooms. So then that's when most of the mycorrhizal species like to come out, because it's when their host stops feeding them, it's their trigger to, okay, let's get out, let's spread our spores and see what else we can find. I gotta say, it is very weird not to hear anyone and just talk in front of my my presentation. It feels like I'm doing a practice, and
You're
uh,
doing
thank you. It's the very first time ever that I give a talk online. I usually do things live. I've given this many times, but live. Anyways, so there's two big categories in mushrooms. When you start hunting mushrooms outside, you're going to find basidiomycotas and you're going to find ascomycotas. The difference is very primal, but in the end, they look not so wildly different. We're going to start our overview with basidiomycotas, which will include the guild species. And when you have a guild species, it's important to divide them with their spore print colors, because the spore print doesn't lie. It's a constant character that you can count on to give you good information about what type of mushroom you have. So the difference between asco, I'm just going to call them asco and basidio. So an asco has 8 spores inside of a little sac called an ascus, and they're going to be ejected from the top. And the basidiomycota has more like a balloon with 4 little spores that grow on top, and they are as well going to be ejected at maturity. They are as different than we are different to a starfish, but in the end, they look visually as similar enough that we have called in the past, like say we in the 1700s, morels were phallus, like this other mushroom you see in the basidiomycota, because they were visually similar enough. They are not phallus, they are morchella, and much more tasty. I don't know if you've ever smelled those phallus mushrooms. They're very, very nasty. Anyway, so back to basidiomycota. We have polypores in there. Polypores are wood decaying mushrooms. They usually don't have a distinct foot, and they have pores under their cap. So instead of gills or all sorts of things that it can be, it's pores. That one specifically, dryad saddle, is the one of the most common spring edible. It smells like melon rind, they say, or like cucumber. You either like it or you don't. I am personally not a big fan, and you also have to make sure that you pick them very young and that they're still tender. So the last inch or two of the cap is the part that you're going to want to harvest. And then you can cook it longer too than another mushroom, like a store-bought mushroom. Like I don't know if you've ever like cooked a risotto where you add the water in the rice slowly, surely. You can do that with the mushroom as well. You don't want to boil it because the flavor is going to be dispersed in the water, diluted in the water. But if you add the water just enough, little bit by little bit, you don't lose any flavor and you have enough steam to cook the thing. So that's one way to soften a mushroom. So yeah, dryad saddle. If you find it, it's always fun to give it a try and see if you like it. We can also find oysters in the spring. Oysters are gilled mushrooms. They also grow on the wood like the polypores, but they have gills. Their spore print will be white. If you think you found an oyster, but the spore print is brown, then it's not an oyster. It's an oysterling, and they're not considered edible. They're not. There's a thunderstorm behind me. They're not considered toxic per se, but they could give you some gastric issues, so we avoid them. The difference between the oyster mushroom and the aspen oyster mushroom, beside the fact that the aspen oyster mushroom grows on aspen, it's pretty minimal. The gills are more spaced in the aspen oyster mushroom, and the oyster mushroom has slightly, like, it's white spore print, but with a little bit of lilac in it. It is not important to make the difference. They're both equally as delicious if you find them. Do blow in the gills because they are often very full of bugs. And it's not good. It's not a problem, but it is not ideal to eat bugs. I think you'll agree with me on that one. So we get to another gilled mushroom, but this time the spore print is brown. rusty brown, it is the funeral bells. So the ones that contain the same deadly toxin as the big white amanitas, the amatoxin. It can basically, there's no antidote. You're going to have a liver transplant or kidney transplant. The thing with the funeral bells is they're so much smaller and less visually attractive than the big white amanitas. So there's not a lot of anecdotes about people who would have gotten poisoned by them. But with dogs, it's definitely a thing. And you'd have to eat more than just like one accidental cap to really hurt yourself, because they're so tiny. But it's good to avoid. They're difficult to identify. All little brown mushrooms, we call them literally LBMs, little brown mushrooms, you want to avoid because of the identification difficulties and the risks that some species in that group have. In the spring, you can find some very unique species of pink gills. There's 3 or 4 species around here that are more common. You have the April pink gill, the spring pink gill, and the straight stalk pink gill. I keep finding the straight stalk. Like this past week, every time I go in the forest, I find 1 or 2. Their spore print is pinkish. You can kind of see it at the top right, where there is a where you can see the gills. They're pinkish. So we're not talking candy pink, but still pinkish. That makes a pink gill. And we don't eat them. They are some of them are toxic and they're difficult to identify. Then we have ink caps. Ink caps get they liquefy and turn into ink as they grow older, as they mature. They are usually edible when young because they don't last very long and they're going to quickly turn into that liquid. But some species you want to avoid alcohol with them. So they contain a toxin called coprin, and with alcohol in your system, it turns into what's called an antabuse reaction, where some people that have alcoholism, they're going to take a medication called disulfiram, and it makes their body feels really bad when they drink alcohol. Like they're going to have some hot flashes, and they're going to feel nauseous, going to throw up, feel like they're going to pass out, all sweaty. So the mushroom contains that same toxin, or that gives that same reaction if you consume it with alcohol. The only one that has that warning attached to it is the common ink cap. It has a smooth surface on the cap instead of having a lot of hair like the shaggy mane. Shaggy mane is not a problem if you consume it with alcohol, but you do have to find it young and still purely white. We found some mica cap as well, as very common in the spring. They have like the cap is almost like little diamonds. Then we have in French it's colibias. I don't like that term. It just englobes too many different mushrooms. But the commonality here is that they have gills, they have a stem, they grow. I was going to say they grow on the ground, not even. The velvet foot grows on the wood, and they have a white spore print. So it's like I said, very large group that includes a lot of different mushrooms that are not in reality related. One of them is the Eastern American platterful mushroom, the mouthful mushroom as well. It has large gills, large not in the sense of thickness, but in the sense of like how from the top of the cap to how far down on the foot they are. So that direction. There's not a lot of flesh on them. So it's not a very good edible mushroom, but it is nice when you can't find anything else. And it's one of the earliest and most common spring species. It'll grow pretty much anywhere, hardwoods, softwoods. Yeah, also make sure that it's not full of bugs because they tend to love that one. And then the velvet foot, it grows on wood, not just in the spring, but in any warm up portion of this in the winter. If it gets a little I have a French word in mind that whatever, there's no translation, but un redoux. So as a warm up in the winter, they're going to come out. They grow on wood. Their stem is like velvety black, and their cap is slimy, rusty orange colored, and very good. When if you go to Asian markets or some bigger supermarkets, I'm in Holland, Vermont. We don't have Enoki's around, but I'm sure, I hope you've seen them. They are that same species, velvet foot, but they're grown in the dark and in like jars so that they're artificially stretched and pale, but they're the same species. And then last species of Basidio mycota, we have the glandular stemmed slippery jack, so a type of bolete. Boletes don't have gills under their cap. They have pores, a little bit like the polypores, but instead of being hard and woody and growing on wood, they're going to grow on the ground because they're mycorrhizal. They grow in partnership with trees. And you're going to be usually able to peel the pores, the tubes, efficiently, easily from the flesh of the cap. You have to peel the cuticle of the cap because it's slimy. All slippery jacks have a slimy cap like this, and they should be peeled because it gives people GI issues. The special thing with this specific slippery jack is it grows with all types of pines, usually in young plantations, and it has a membrane around the cap that looks like it's a veil. So it looks like a structure that would hide the pores before they're mature to protect them, and then only open when they're ready to make their spores. But that membrane is never actually attached to the stem, so it's not a true vulva. I'm sorry. It's not a true partial veil. There we go. Finding my words. All right, now moving to the ascomycotas. That's the group where morels are included. They include cup fungi to start. We have some very colorful species in the spring, and it's interesting to see. There's not a lot in the spring, but when you do find something, it is so pretty. You can find the witch's cauldron in pine and conifer type of areas, and in thick moss. It's really like jelly, like just a big blub of gel. You can't eat it, but it's just cool to find. And then the spring orange peel fungus, it's very bright orange inside, and then the outside is kind of bluish, greenish. And if you're really lucky, you can find the albino species where it's lacking that orange pigment, and then you see that the green is actually blue. It's pretty cool. The scarlet elf cup is technically edible, not crazy delicious, not very tasty, but it's a good consolation when you can't find anything else in the spring. And it's just so red and pretty. Nothing really looks like that in the spring. You can't confuse it with anything else. If you take a cup fungi and you put it on kind of a stem, you're going to get an elfin saddle or a helvella. The cup can also turn into a saddle shape like the ones on the right, but those are more like summer species. In the spring, you're going to find Helvella costifera and Helvella acetabulum. We don't eat them because they mature late, and you usually need to look at their spores to identify them. And by the time you have these spores, they're not edible anymore. They're too old. Now, false morels. They're a big part of spring mycology. They have been consumed for a long time in certain parts of the world, especially the false morel Gyromitra venenata or esculenta, if you're depending on how up to date you are with taxonomy. But we have found in the recent years that they contain monomethylhydrazine, so a component or a toxin that turns into a component of rocket fuel in your system. So they're in reality quite dangerous. Not all of them contain that toxin, just some of them, but definitely the most common one, likely most common one around where you are, the false morel, you want to avoid it. So here for the Saromitran, it might be, or they're starting to study to see if there's a relation between the Gyromitrin and Lou Gehrig disease, so ALS, because they found that some pockets of where there's a higher proportion of people with ALS in a certain village, that they would be consumers of the false morel. So consuming that mushroom could be related to more than just GI issues or deaths and scenarios where you eat a lot of them, but also like a slow carcinogenic and neurotoxic effect over a longer time. They're still sold and commercialized in Sweden, but they're strongly discouraged. Their consumption is strongly discouraged. Sorry. The other Gyromitra the false morels that we haven't found Gyromitrin in, we are on the cautious side and say we don't know if they're edible, because usually in one genus or in one group of mushrooms, you're going to want to avoid everyone from one group just until it's proven safe, since one of them is dangerous. Moving to the Mortulaceae, so closer to Morels. We have the veined cup. Microscopically, it is like pretty much like a morel. So genetically, it appears to be very close to actual morels, but it's more like a cup fungi. It's technically edible, but it's difficult to identify between this and the fishtail cup that contains Gyromitrin. The difference can be difficult for to note for some. Sorry, can be difficult to note for people that are not very used to identifying mushrooms. It smells like chlorine. That's a pretty impressive smell for that type of mushroom. I don't know. It was pretty interesting when I found it. Then we have thimble morels, the conic and the wrinkled thimble morel. They have a cap that is completely loose from the stem, or completely loose. It just is on it like this and is not attached at the end of the stem. They are technically edible, but not very good. And there are lots of anecdotes that people feel sick after eating a lot of them, or have some coordination issues after eating too many or not uncooked ones. So we avoid them. Then last one before the actual morels, we have the semi-free morels. These have a cap that is attached halfway at the. I can't really point from here, but I guess you can see the cap is free for the bottom half of it, and then the rest is all attached. It is a true morel. Technically, it is in the genus Morchella, and it's technically a black morel, but they are, to me, visually, they are the last step until we get to an actual morel, the true morels. For a long time, we used to split them into yellow morels and black morels, and now finally we can redefine a little bit what morels we have. Before we talk about morels, let's make sure that everybody knows the different parts of a morel. You might see them in the description when you read about morels, trying to identify the one you found. So the morel itself can be called an ascoma because it's an ascomycete, just like a basidiomycete could be called a basidioma. The ascoma has a cap and a stem. The morel itself is made of pits and ridges or alveoli, not brain swirls, let's say. More like honeycombs and pits and ridges than a brain. Then if you cut the morel inside, you see just a tiny bit of actual flesh. That's called the context. We're not talking the inner surface. We're really just that inner flesh. And then on black morels, that one is a yellow, so it's not the best one to show, but on black morels, you're going to have a rim or a sulcus, which is like a very, like 5% of the cap is not connected to the stem compared to the half-free morel that was 50% of the cap. So this is a summary of the species you need to know if you're going to hunt mushrooms in the spring. You're going to want to not eat the false morels, Gerometra, and you're going to be looking mostly for yellow morels and black morels. Now, when you join the mycology club, you're going to probably be put in contact with some keys. We use keys to identify mushrooms. They're like questionnaires. This one is a simple one that I made just for tonight that brings us to different types of morels. I recognize 4 types of morels: the garden morels, the yellow, the blacks, and the fire morels. So let's go through the key. If we start at 1, actually this is not the right version of the key. It just says 1. It should say 111 on the left. So anyways, no biggie. Just don't look at the numbers. So if the cap is fully detached from the stem, it's a verp. So sorry, a thimble morel. I didn't do my translation job all the way through, I guess. If the cap is detached from the stem and it's only on the lower half, we have a half-free morel, or morion in French. And then if the cap is fully attached to the stem, or almost, we have a morel. In garden and cultivated areas, mostly west of the Rockies, it's going to be a garden morel. In natural ecosystem with pale ridges, yellow to brown ridges from young to old, and the pits are rather randomly distributed. There's no rim or barely. It's going to be a yellow morel. And then both fire morels and black morels share dark ridges that are gray, brown, or black. Some species are start yellow and will eventually become dark, and it can be confusing, but they will have pits that are distributed vertically, rather almost like little ladders. And there will be a rim or a sulcus on those as well. If they're found in burnt areas, they're going to be fire morels, most likely, though some black morels can be stimulated by fire as well without being obligate fire. Fire species. In 2011, someone called Mr. Kerry O'Donnell, he is an American mycologist, he sequenced all the morels that he could find in different collections around the world, and he found about 24 different species of yellow morels, and black morels, and he coded them MEL for Morchella elata. So we have the MELs, and then we have the MES, Morchella esculenta, the MES, the yellow ones. So he found 24 different species of black and 16 different species of yellow. We now know that there are 80 different species of morels around the world. I think we are at 37 MELs and 28 MES, something like that. So we found more since. Now the code is fun because you can really divide and re-clean the different morel concept around the world, but you need names to talk about them. In 2012, so pretty quickly after O'Donnell sequenced everything, some people went to work on naming things. And the thing is, an American was working on at the same time as Europeans were working on it, and the Europeans happened to publish just a few weeks before the American could publish officially his stuff. So a lot of morels have 2 different names. Only one is officially accepted, but you might see in some American publications, you might see the American name. So anyways, I'm giving both for funds. So we have yellow morels in Vermont. We have two different species. They are not, we can't see the difference without sequencing them right now. I believe we're going to find differences once we study them better with their ecology. I think the elm yellow morel maybe can grow with maples, but hey, we'll see when we have these answers. So Morchella americana is the same as Esculentoides, and Morchella ulmaria is the same as Cryptica. I put little icons on slides, some slides. It's easier if you have the handout in hand because they're there as well, but at the end, we're going to try and remember what each icon meant or what it referred to. So this icon here is alveoli of like honeycombs for the yellow morel. As you can see, the pits are all over the place. They're not really like nicely laddered vertically like a black would be. And there's no sulcus, no rim. You mostly find yellow morels on the East Coast. There are some species on the West Coast. I think Morchella prava for the most part, but definitely not as common as it is on the East Coast. Then we have 3 different species of black morels. Actually, Morchella norvegiensis. I think I should probably put it in the garden morels rather than the black, but whatever, details at this point. They are also not, we can't see the difference without sequencing them. They have their pits and ridges more vertically arranged. The ridges are darker. They're black morels. They have more of a conical shape like this rather than more of a round for the yellows. So that is why I chose a black triangle as their icon. You can find black morels everywhere on the continent, but they're not the same species when you're out west and when you're in the east. There are different ones. Now, we do have some fire morels in the east, but it's mostly a West Coast phenomenon where big fires happen in the summer, and then the next spring there's just a huge bloom of morels, of thousands and thousands of morels. It needs a certain type of fire, a certain type of temperature, and a certain type of tree for to be the right environment. And the forest that we have, let's say up north in Quebec, are more spruce, and you need pines for fire morels. You can find with some jack pine if like there's some pockets of jack pine. If there's a fire in one of those, it has been seen that some fire morels will come out on the east, but it's less common. And in Quebec, I know it's been found that there was a potential, like thousands of morels found in certain jack pine forests that had burned, but the logistics of bringing those morels back to commercialize them was much more difficult than it is out west, where it's all organized already. So that was an obstacle in making the East Coast fire morels happen. Like I said, mostly out west, some very scattered mentions in the east. And then finally, we have the garden morels. They are morels that are completely saprobes. They're really going to grow as decomposers, and they don't need to partner up with plants to grow. I forgot to say the yellows are mycorrhizal for the most part, but also saprobes. They do both, and they're very flexible in their ways of life. The black morels are exclusively mycorrhizal. They are obligate mycorrhizal, I should say. Fire morels are mostly decomposers, but it is thought that they interact with the few plants that survive after a fire as well. Facultative, optional mycorrhizal species. And then the garden morels are fully decomposers. We have Morchella importuna and Morchella rufobrunea, so the landscape and black morel and the woodchip morel. They are international. The yellows and the black, they were endemic to where you were. So if you're in Europe, you have your species. If you're in the East, you have your species. And if you're in the West, they're different species. These garden morels are the same everywhere where you are in the world. They travel very differently. But you don't find them in the East much. They're really going to be out West. All right. Normally, I would be taking a break around here in the real life situation. We're 40 minutes in, which is great.
Do you want to take a break, Annabelle?
No, I'm good. I'm just my mouth is dry. I feel like I'm doing a big. It feels more like a monologue than when I present live. I don't see the interested faces or not, or like so whatever. It's fine. Everything's
Do you
fine.
want to take a few questions here, just
Yeah,
for like
sure. If there's any
Okay.
questions, that'd be great.
If anyone has questions, please raise your hand and we'll call you out. Oh yeah, Charlotta, please.
Okay, I might have missed this because I had a tick on me and I needed to move for
Oh,
a
no.
second. But did you say something about like how to distinguish the false morels from the regular morels?
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Yeah, I think I went pretty fast on that. So the false morels, they don't have so when you cut a false morel in two, inside the stem, it's full of flesh and turns and loops and whatnot. And the real morel has truly empty stem. It's like going to be like not like a flute, but like a straw. And that's really the main thing to do the difference. Also, the fact that a real morel has pits and ridges,
Right.
like a alveoli or a honeycomb, much more than a brain-like structure.
So it's pretty easy.
Yes, if you know, I think most people are very able to do the difference between a false morel and a morel as long as they know that they exist. And it's more a question of knowing that they shouldn't be eating the false morels because they're going to be told by certain people, oh yeah, I've been eating that my entire life. Don't worry about it. Well, it's my job to tell you, yes, worry about it. No, don't eat it.
Great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Emma, please.
Hi. I was just wondering if you know if any of the mushrooms that we've been talking about are useful for dyeing, like natural dyeing.
Ooh, that's a good question. The ones we've been talking about, no. But I do know I did a little dyeing workshop with my club last year, so I dove into this a little bit. Chaga you can find more easily in the spring before the trees have their leaves out. You can do some cool browns and beige with chaga. And then I think that would be it for spring species. I think polypores are also sometimes very they're growing actively in the spring instead of being found like old and off season, and they often have some potential dyeing potential. So I would be focusing on polypores and chaga for foraging for dyes in the spring.
Thanks.
Of course.
Sandra.
Thanks. It's actually Sandra's husband using Sandra's computer,
Oh.
but it's okay. So I'm new to the area. I haven't been here very long. Do the false morels grow in close proximity to the real ones?
Yes, they absolutely can. The typical habitat is in a forest, and then the actual mix of species or the type of soil that you need can be the same for both species. So commonly with yellow morels, you're going to find Mo Blancomyces type of false morel. So the Corfii and Bethany, I don't know if you have better names for them so that he knows what I'm talking about. But they're like the false morel, but more like orangey beige color instead of being darker red.
They're sometimes referred to, I think the common name is lorchels.
Lorchels. Okay, sure.
Yeah. But
I'll use that
basically,
now.
all of those ones that look like a brain, just like a big leathery brown brain, that are not morels. Yeah, they do tend to keep close company.
Okay, great. Because I've found the false ones, so that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah, that's good.
And I will say also, as a supporting voice, a lot of people will tell you that they eat those, and I really wouldn't, just based on the studies that are coming out. It's just not worth it.
Absolutely. I agree.
Thank you.
It's easier to never develop the habits than starting to eat them and feeling okay and just having to stop. In Europe, telling people that have eaten them their entire lives to stop has been difficult from what I understand, and they're just really stubborn and keep eating them. All right. Thank you for the questions. Is good to hear your voices. I appreciate it. So we're gonna talk about how to find morels now. So that now that we know what types of morel there are, we're gonna talk about their environment. So let's forget about different species of morel. We're talking all morels from now on. Well, soon now on. So on the West Coast, you're going to find mostly fire morels. If you go like serious morel hunting, you're going to you're going to count your finds in pounds. And if you hunt morels on the East Coast, you're going to see there's a hot spot in the Michigan, Wisconsin area, and you're going to count your morels instead of counting the pounds. You're going to find fire morels out west, and then the east, it's going to be yellow morels for the most part. If you are interested, I for sure would like to go one day, but there's a National Mushroom Festival in Boyne City every spring, and it's in Michigan, and they go in the same forest to see who can find the most morels or the biggest morel and all sorts of contests like this. It's always the locals that win, so it shows you need to know your environment. If you go on iNaturalist and you just look for morels, all species mixed, you end up with this map. You see that there is a bias where people live, Montreal, Burlington, Ottawa, and Toronto. But there is clearly a gap pretty much in the Adirondacks and in Maine and some parts of Quebec and New Hampshire. We can explain the distribution of morels with a recipe with 4 ingredients. That's what we're going to do for the rest of the presentation, explain those ingredients. So the first ingredient is the soil. You're going to want a soil that is on the alkaline side and on the better drainage side. Ideally sandy or loamy, but definitely not clay and not boggy. The map here, you can kind of see between Ottawa, if you make like a reverse U shape between Kingston, Ottawa, Montreal, and Burlington, this is the brown part of the, again, I can't point, I usually have a pointer, the brown part on the right image. That happens to be where there was the Champlain Sea. So way back 10,000 years ago, there was a big glacier on our continent, and it squished everything down really deep. When it started melting, the continent was still deep, and it allowed the ocean to seep in and bring salts and animals and all sorts of things that come with oceans that wouldn't be with a lake or a river. And it deposited some clay, some sand, and some alkaline material. So that region, the Lake Champlain Valley, is a good region for morels in general. You're going to want to avoid the places where the silt and the clay fell. So it's really general idea and not precise. You're going to have to look at precisely where you are, kind of touch the soil to see the difference, but avoid the ones that are too much like clay and really focus on the ones that are better drained in that area. And then in the light green, the number 2 on the map, those are the ones that you're going to want to avoid because they are more like granite and it's more acidic. And it's also a little more elevated in altitude, so there's more softwoods, and softwood needles are acidic, so your soils are going to be more acidic. Those are the region that you're going to want to avoid when you're looking for morels. And then we don't have it in Quebec, but when I give that talk in Vermont, I have to mention it. The beige, the number 3, those are the Vermont Piedmont, and those are good for morels. They're interesting. They're the right habitat, I should say. It's just the different way to visualize what I just said. But in Vermont, we have the Champlain lowlands, so those are a good spot to go morel hunting in Vermont. And then where I live, the New England Boundary Mountains, it's very acidic, very softwoods, very cold, very wet. Even if I find what would look like the right environment, I never find morels. I have to travel around to find them. Again, limestone, good, granite, bad, shale and schist, neutral is what I would say for morels. So first ingredient was the soil. Second ingredient is the plant host. We have 5 options here. We have elms, specifically the dying ones. A live elm would not produce morels, but a dead elm will produce them for about 2 years. The year that it dies and then the year afterwards. Elms have this umbrella shape that they start, they fan their branches and they tend to almost weep like a willow. They have coarse leaves that are double dented, so there's double teeth. There's teeth I don't know how I can explain it without a paper and a pointer. But anyways, lots of little teeth on the leaf and a very coarse feeling on the actual surface. When you try to identify trees in the spring, it can be difficult. We had a walk last week with Carolyn to learn how to identify them. So be sure to talk with her if you want some tips. As for the elms, they're dying from the Dutch elm disease, unfortunately. It's an introduced disease. It has been around since about 1900. So there's a beetle initially that will get into the tree, and that will allow a fungus, the actual disease that kills the tree, to get inside the vascular system of the tree, and then to slow the progression of that mushroom, that fungi. It's gonna block its vessels and kill itself, basically. They can survive a couple years after being infected, but some of them will die the year of. If you see signs that an elm is dying, keep an eye out and come back in the spring, because there might be morels around it. You also can look in old orchards under apple trees. I didn't put an apple for the icon because you're not going to see apples in the spring. You're going to see the flowers of the apple trees. Apple trees and flowers are a sign. Flowering apple trees are a sign that you are in the right season for morels, by the way. So apple trees need to be alive, but about 25% of their branches should be dead for them to be considerable or a consideration for morels. It needs to be a dying tree. It can't be too young. If you have issues identifying apple trees, you can ask us. Then you can go under white pines as well. Not any white pine. You're going to want to make sure that the soil is also adequate, because the white pine has an ecological niche that is much more wide than that of morel. But you can find yellow morels under sandy white pine areas and exposed as well. It's like the soil needs to be heated. The icon for white pines is a hand, because there are 5 letters in white, WHITE, and there are 5 long needles in the white pine. There we go. It's usually the tallest tree in our forest. They're popping out of the forest if you just look at the canopy. You can also find morels in aspen groves. Aspens have a kind of a heart-shaped leaf. Their stem is flat, so they catch in the wind and they go like this. Yeah, we're gonna find black morels in aspen groves. They are where I found my 50 black morels this season, in a region where there usually aren't much morels because of the type of soil we have. That was fun. And then I believe in Vermont, you're going to find morels mostly or a lot under ash trees, along with the elm from the beginning. Ash trees need to be alive to produce morels. It is thought, I have seen on the internets, and there's absolutely no proof of that, but it is thought that the ash trees would be exuding some sort of toxin against the morels, and that's what would make them fruit. Because we'll see the next ingredient after the plant host is a disturbance, and we have a disturbance when we're talking elms and apple trees because they're dying, but in the case of ashes, they need to be alive and well. So why would a morel associate with them? It's still unclear. We're still trying to figure that out. And then tulip trees, I'll go there soon. Ash trees have some sort of diamond-shaped bark, much more regular diamondy pattern than other trees. So you can look for that when you're trying to find them. And they have composed leaves that are opposite. So each leaf is facing each other on the stem. The tulip trees, we don't have much of it in Vermont, but if you are ever lower south in the States, you're going to find them. And they are an interesting host species for morels. Unfortunately, our ashes are dying. There is another introduced species of little bug, the ash borer, the emerald ash borer, that lay their eggs and end up killing trees. So that is no good. I am going to take a 1-minute break just to pee. I'm starting to feel it blur my mind. So bear with me. I will be right back. Thank you very much.
If anyone has any questions in the meantime, I will try my best to answer them. But if not, we'll just chill. Yeah, Charlotta. Oh, you're on mute, Charlotta. Charlotta, you're on mute. You're muted.
For some, yeah, I'm on now.
Okay.
Okay. For some trees, they seem like they're mycorrhizal.
Yes.
And other trees, they're sort of saprophytic, or even to some degree, like pathogenic a little bit. Like they prey on, I mean, prey, it's the wrong word, dying trees.
Yes.
That's kind of rare that you see a fungi kind of like, falling into all these different categories, at least in my experience. Any input on that? What do you think is the ability for it to do that, or what's going on?
Well, okay, I will admit that I do not understand the relationship that morels have with ash trees in particular. And I feel like in general, we're not super solid on it in terms of a scientific consensus. The most recent information that I've heard is that they are not mycorrhizal, particularly with ash trees, but there is some sort of they're perhaps endophytic. So they're
Yeah.
within the plant cells themselves and waiting for a specific conditions to arise.
It's bigger.
Like a trigger, which is why when an ash tree has emerald ash borer, in a last flash of desperation, a bunch of morels will appear the year that the ash tree succumbs to emerald ash borer, but not afterwards. So it could be a part of the successional species that arise out of the plant cells, perhaps, which is actually we're learning more and more is like a increasingly, or we're understanding that it's a common situation that many of these spores are like embedded within the plant cells from the time the seed germinates.
Right.
So, yeah.
Mhm.
Just vamping while you're gone, Annabelle.
Oh no, good.
I was just asking about this sort of how the morels are a little complicated in
They
their
are, so yeah, I
you
tried
know.
to find answers, and the more you read, the less you know. And
Well, that's good to know. Then we know that we
Yeah.
don't know.
yeah, exactly. It is like you think you're figuring it out, and then something comes up like, but that doesn't make sense, and you're still in, yeah, you still don't know. All right, so I guess we can continue. I talked a little bit about disturbances. So morels like to rough things up. They will make their fruits, their morels, so that they can escape a situation and make it to another habitat. So when the host dies, it, like Bethany was saying, it's like that last spurt of like, okay, let's get out of here, let's find something else. When there's some fires, it's unclear if it's the change of pH, the change of sudden lack of competition from other organisms, or even a more nutrients suddenly available, but something triggers these morels to come out the spring after a forest fire. And then it is common to see morels in digging sites, excavating sites, especially in the sandy areas, like a sand pit, like the edges, the forest edges of a sand pit that still has some activity. That would be somewhere to look for morels. All right, and then the final ingredient is what makes the morels come actually out of the ground. It is the ground temperature. The air temperature is the second best predictor, but really morels are going to come out when the soil reaches 40 to 50 degrees and the air reaches 60 to 70 degrees. It's the temperature at 4 inches deep, and you can find that in almanacs. So you can follow morels that way. You can also go to the Great Morel Project. People are uploading their finds of morels. It's not so much for location, but more for timing. So you can see them move up north as the season unfolds. It's about, I think I read like 100 miles a week, but starting in February in California, something like that. Around where we are, it is late April to early June. We're really in it right now, even a little bit. It seems to starting to end because of the temperature, depending on where you are exactly. But at least in my area, I'm going next week, 21st or 20th, and I think we're going to be finding more old morels, leftover morels, than fresh blooming ones. The black morels always fruit before the yellow morels. So late April, don't expect to have yellows, but starting mid-May, late May, don't expect to have blacks either. Think about the altitude and the latitude. It will also affect the timing of when the morels come out, which really, again, is the soil temperature. So if you're higher up or higher up in the state or higher up in altitude, it will influence that soil temperature. And then make it work in your favor of if you know that the soil is warmer in certain place, go there at the beginning of the season. So the south facing slopes, go see them a week or two before the north facing slopes. You can also look at the ecology around you, at the plants around you, to know if it's a good time to pick morels. The white trilliums are going to be flowerings. The lilacs, the maples, and the apple trees are going to be flowering. And the oak leaves are going to be the size of a mouse or a squirrel ear. So tiny, tiny. And if you have ramps, and if you like to pick ramps, just know that when the ramps are done, the morels are done. There is no need to keep looking. Then once you are in the right place at the right time, you still have to find your morel. And it is not easy. really not easy. They are masters at camouflage. Somehow they evade the human eye very easily. My tip would be that once you find one morel, you stop and then you squat down and you just scan everywhere very, very carefully. And then you go from morel to morel, scanning every single time. And once you see a morel, don't stop looking at it because it will disappear. Even you see it, you look away, and then it's not there anymore. It's wild like that. Do think about bug spray. They coincide. Morel season coincides with mosquito and black fly season, but avoid your hands because you're going to touch your morels and then you're going to eat your morels. Also, be careful about ticks and poison ivy. Be discreet if you bring a basket. I like to bring backpacks when I go morel hunting because I don't want people to know that I'm mushroom hunting. Because in the spring, if you're mushroom hunting, clearly it is for morels. And they are so difficult to find that people are being a little more possessive of their spots than with other types of mushrooms, I would say. Your bag or backpack should be well ventilated, mostly for sanitation or cleanliness of the morels. You just don't want them to kind of rot in the heat of your backpack. There's no proof that they will spread their spores better in the mesh bag. That's usually the older morels anyways that are producing spores, and those morels should be left outside because they are spent. They are too old to eat anyways. You can put your morels in brown paper bags or wax paper wraps, like a candy wrap like this. Those are both good ways to keep your morels. You can put them in the fridge for like 3 days. I think we're going to talk about preservation, like kitchen preservation again later. Yeah, you can bring a walking stick for turning the leaves because it's gets old to squat and bend all the time. And think about bringing a cooler because you want your mushrooms to stay nice. Worldwide, I can't pronounce that word. Blah. Throughout the world, there is a decline in morels. It's not because of morel picking. We can rest assured that it's a sustainable practice to pick mushrooms. The decline is caused by changes in the environment that we very directly cause with our fuel emissions and habitat loss from cutting forests and just impacting habitats. There's a question that our warmer winters might have a negative impact on morels. They need that cold, like a good cold snap for them to have that trigger in the spring and fruit properly. And then there's also concerns about nitrogen pollution because if morels have this ability to form mycorrhizae and whatever type of mycorrhizae they are, but if they are able to take some nutrients from a host tree and you make the host tree fed in a different way with pollution or engrais, like not manure, whatever, a word that I can think of right now.
Fertilizer?
Fertilizer, thank you. Yes. So if you put fertilizers on mycorrhizal partners, they don't need their mushrooms as much. So if the morels are used to have that availability of resources from a host tree, but the host tree doesn't care about them anymore, that might have an effect on them. Because it's been shown to be an issue with chanterelles in Europe. Anyways, eating morels. You want to make sure that the morels you pick are fresh. It is easy to get excited and want to eat the 1 or 2 or 3 kind of old morels that you found because they're the only things you found and you're so excited about a morel, but just don't do it because they can really make you feel sick if they're not fresh. You got to be careful about what can be in the stem. So the bugs and even I think I saw a picture of a salamander. They grow so fast that they can entrap animals and insects inside of their stem. And they're very appreciated by slugs and insects in general. So be picky about the morels that you pick, and leave the old ones there because they're the ones that are gonna reproduce. You don't want to soak your morels because the flavor is going to get diluted in the water, but you can rinse them or brush them, and then think about trimming the old parts ideally while you're on site, while you're outside, so you spread the spores as much as possible, and your basket is cleaner, and once you get home everything is clean already. It helps to be reasonable in our finds to process them while you're already outside. That way you don't pick too much and have to trash what you can't process. Morels are really good for drying. Because they're hollow, they dry really easily. You can put them in a dehydrator. You can put them kind of on a mesh outside on a nice sunny day. As long as they are crispy, dry within 48 hours, that's kind of the cutoff for sanitation. They're going to be good, whatever the method. Crispy, dry, 48 hours. You can also freeze your morels. Some people dust them in flour and then freeze them fresh, or they freeze them just straight fresh, and that is also another good way to do it. There's a few morel species, morel recipes on foragerchef.com. It's personally my favorite recipe blog for wild mushroom cooking. They have a lot of different species, and they have a kind of a blog explanation on each different species as well. So anyways, good morel recipes. They're often paired with like creamy, their taste really develops in fat, so you need that fattiness. So the cream is a good way to do it, or frying them, or breading and frying them is another way. You want to make sure that you cook your morels, because raw morels are toxic, like literally toxic. You want to aim for 15 minutes on medium-high heat, or another way to figure or imagine it is this caramelization, that Maillard effect, where the sugars start to convert into or the proteins start to convert into sugar or something. Caramelization. Just cook them well. If you eat them raw, it is pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have gastrointestinal distress. And if you are not very healthy in the first place, that distress can lead to such a dehydration that you might die from it. In 2023, in Montana, 2 people died from morel poisoning after eating raw morels that were served to them in sushis. That restaurant will likely close, if not already the case. But they had health issues. Something like 60, 70 people were sick from that restaurant, but 2 people were elderly and frail in the first place and got so sick that they couldn't sustain the dehydration, and their body just couldn't take it, and they passed. There was also in Vancouver, in, I forget when, early 2000, maybe late 2000, going 2010 maybe. Anyways, there was a banquet for a retiring police officer, and some chef, junior chef, I believe, decided to feed them a salad of raw morels, shiitake, and button mushrooms, and multiple hundred people were sick. Nobody died, but many were sick. If you eat too many of them, either over a period of time or in a meal, you might have a cerebellar syndrome. That's more of in Europe, there's, I think, 30 cases a year where people have coordination issues and some dizziness when they have a history of eating a lot of morels. The symptoms go away in 24, 48, 72 hours and don't leave any consequences, but still kind of spooky. And almost to the end. Hi, baby. Yeah. So something that you guys need to know, because you're going to meet her at our walks, is that I'm a mama of a little toddler, Iris McMudlin, and she needs to say goodnight.
Good night.
So good night, everybody.
Good night, Iris.
Good night.
Good night. Can I have a smooch? Yeah. Are you gonna see everybody tomorrow at the mushroom talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Sunday you're gonna come walk with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All
All
right.
right.
Mama's gonna keep going. Love you.
Hey.
Can you close the door on the way out?
We sleep. You're gonna go on them.
Yep. I'm gonna keep talking while you sleep, but you know what? I'm gonna be done soon, and then I'm gonna come see you for bedtime. Okay?
And you'll massage my back here.
Maybe. All right. Love you.
What? What's over here? What is here?
It's okay. All done now. Bye. Nothing good. Pickles. Bye. All right. Growing morels. So it's been over 100 years that people have been trying to grow morels and just couldn't do it, or the attempts couldn't be recreated. The first person that actually made it was from Michigan and it was in the 80s. His first patent was for growing morels from the sclerotia. So the sclerotia is kind of the key point that they needed to figure out in the morel life cycle before they could domesticate it and grow it. Mr. Tom Volk is a big, a well-known personality in mycology. He unfortunately passed a couple years ago from lifelong health issues, but he's the one who cracked the code of the morel life cycle and figured out that there's really two special, interesting things about the morel life cycle. The first thing is that they make is sclerosium to, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to translate this slide, or I don't have the right version. Sorry. So the sclerosium is like a morel potato. It's an organ for reserve and survival. And it will be created once the morel runs out of food or there's a shock to it, a lack of nutrients. And then from these morel potatoes, you can grow morels in the right conditions and the very picky conditions that morel require for fruiting. And then the second thing that is interesting about the morel life cycle is that they're oh my god, I forgot to restudy that before the presentation. But anyways, they have a lot of different nucleus inside of one cell. So we have one half of our genome from mom, one half from dad, and that makes us two copies, one from dad, one from mom. Morels can have a multitude of copies of all sorts of things, and they can share it much more freely than mammals would. And the mix happens at the actual morel, like on the morel, where the divisions of all the cells happen. So in the same morel cluster, let's say you have 8 or 10 morels together, they can all be of a different genetic portrait. So it's really very much different than what we're used to with usual genetics. Anyways, I didn't explain it very well. I'm sorry. But the important part is this sclerosium. So by figuring out this sclerosium, Tom Volk was able to cultivate morels in first like a rich substrate. He puts the mycelium in there. The mycelium eats the entire nutrient content of that. And then when it is done, it grows on the top portion of the jar in the nutrient poor environment. It makes its sclerosium, and then you can take that sclerosium, put it in like these kind of buckets, and they water them and keep the conditions very specifically the right ones, and then you get morels. Nowadays, however, nobody grows morels commercially that way. It was shown to be very much like the pests were an issue. There was a lot of mold and a lot of different molds coming, and the taste was also not as good as wild morels. They were said to be more bland. So anyways, all those efforts were stopped, and in China now, what is happening is they grow morels outdoors it doesn't look outdoors on the pictures because they have a canopy. So outdoors, but with a canopy, and with some trees as well in certain ones. And the special technique that they use is called exogenous nutrient bags, where they will inseminate the morel in the ground, let them grow, and at a certain point they will bring bags of compost of some sort, and that we don't understand very well why, but that is what is going to make the morel go ahead and fruit. So in the case here, it's an addition of nutrients. And another interesting fact, the morels that are cultivated in this case are always garden morels or fire morels. They're the only two types of morels that can be domesticated because of their decomposer lifestyle. If you want to learn how to grow morels, I unfortunately couldn't find a good resource on the Vermont side, but if you're not too shy to go to Quebec and dip your toe in French, you can find Violon et Champignon. It's a guy from just north shore of Montreal, and he cracked the code of morel growing in our region in the Northeast. I know he uses some apples like you see on the picture, and he burns his parcels. He uses a canopy. He uses the exogenous bags. He gives workshops and sells the mycelium. So maybe I will see you there. These are the references I read for tonight. And if you want to practice your memory at what we've seen, I'll go over quickly, but the first one is to make sure that you don't leave traces behind you, because you don't want to share your morel spots because they're so precious, so rare. The I don't even know how you call those in English. The sand timer. Sorry, that's for the soil. So you want a sandy soil that is well drained, that is on the alkaline side. The triangle is the black morel with its conical shape, the fire for fire morels. The reverse triangle are the aspens, because that's where you will find black morels. And I think I didn't say it earlier, but they have some of these black patches on their bark as well that helps identify them. The umbrella is the elm. The dizzy guy are for the thimble morels and eating too many morels. The little tractor pickup thing is for disturbances. The diamond for the ash trees. The flower for the apple trees. The death icon for the false morels, the lorchels. The temperature, the thermometer for the soil temperature. The honeycombs for the yellow morels. The hand for the white pine. And the little plant for the garden morels. And the bonus is all the love and patience that you need for finding morels. Thank you very much, everybody. It was fun and different to do it online. I much prefer to see faces, but it's okay. Thank you. Oh, I see little hands clapping. Thank you.
Thank you. Annabelle, are you okay with answering a few questions before
Absolutely.
we
Yes.
Okay. If you do have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat, and I will call you out, or I will read your question if you would prefer not to speak. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Charlotta.
I should just not be allowed to ask any more questions. I think my quota is up.
No, I think you're good. I think you're keeping we're keeping everyone engaged. It's good.
So Annabelle, I don't know if you caught this, and I don't know very much about this, but there's a group in Denmark who also are growing morels.
Yes.
Yeah,
And they have these little trays.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like in a grassy setup. It looked a little bit like the Chinese.
Yes.
But it seems a little hush-hush. And someday when I'm home, since I'm originally from Denmark, I'm going to go and see if I can meet these guys and see if they will tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they will. It seems a little,
So in my research, I did fall on it's called the Danish Morel project.
Mhm.
They've been going for a while and they have success, but they're a little, it looks a little secretive on their techniques.
Right.
So
I don't know
but
if
yeah,
they want to patent it or whatever they're
came
doing.
across it. I think they do want to patent it. My understanding is that any indoor trials with Morels so far have been unsuccessful, and the outdoor is just winning the race to cultivating Morels. So not sure how they do it in Denmark, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't either. And I don't know if you have any take on. So there are some sort of mushroom growers, just like your friend in Quebec, that is selling
Mhm.
spawn, and it's like these little plugs. I just bought some actually that you're supposed to just stick in the ground around the trees that you think that they will
Really?
work. But they do say on the websites, this is not fully researched. You
Yeah.
know that you're going into something where like
Right.
you might not get anything.
So, right. I would
scientific.
think that if the environment is good for morels, you will find natural morels most probably. There are some anecdotes about people trashing their morels leftovers under apple trees in their backyards and maybe spreading a little bit of limestone or whatever the white alkaline
Right.
stuff.
Yep,
But,
that works.
anyways. And that has worked, kind of patchy, anecdotal here and there. My understanding from the people that are trying hard to grow morels is that it's not difficult to grow the mycelium, but it's really difficult to make them fruit. And kind of just hoping that it works is really not enough in that case. It's an advanced species for advanced growers, people that have a lot of confidence and experience in growing mushrooms and growing outdoors. And yeah, you can always hope the best, but I wouldn't be very hopeful of anything, honestly, personally.
I'll have to improve my French so I can go visit
Yes.
a friend in Quebec.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions? No? Okay. Well, if that's the case, I just want to thank Annabelle again for this wonderful presentation. This was so cool.
Thank
I
you.
learned a lot. And thank you all for being members of the Mycological Society. We're so excited you're here. We really hope to continue doing more of these programs. If you are interested, if this was interesting to you and you are interested in attending an in-person class in St. Johnsbury, please go to our events calendar and sign up now because these events are selling out. And I want to make sure that all of our members can get access to them if they wish. Yeah, that's it. I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Night.
Bye-bye.